Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, and maybe the only guy with a sports podcast who doesn't have a strong Shedeur Sanders take. But no, I have plenty of takes on, of course, the Missouri players in the NFL draft, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. First, though, I do want to remind you quickly that this episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to learn more. And I want to start today's episode, of course, by talking about, yes, my favorite thing in the world. Indeed, Missouri football. Not Locked On Shedeur Sanders like the rest of the country. But Ohio defensive tackle Bralen Henderson, according to Power Mizzou's Twitter feed, going to be on a visit today, according to that young man's agent. Also, Jaylin Caldwell, an offensive tackle, on a visit as well. He's from Grand Valley State. So there are 3 spots still left available on the Missouri roster, and it could very well be that Missouri takes a couple more linemen for sure, and at spots, well, Missouri's pretty loaded, I think, on the defensive line, but again, Missouri seemingly never satisfied at any position, and why should they be when you have some money to spend? And, well, Missouri's spending seemingly all of its NIL money on football right now. Who can really blame them, quite honestly? Dennis Gates and his team still have 2 spots available as well. And, well, to be honest, I don't know who they're really even kicking the tires on at the moment. It sure seems like there's a reason Missouri took a couple local guys in basketball early in the process, and in Northweather and Javon Porter. Well, maybe the money just isn't there in quite the same way. Maybe the prices have gone up. There's a lot of different things that could be at play here. But again, back to football. That was my main talking point here. I'm just impressed that Missouri continues to build on strength on the defensive line. Not only on the interior here, potentially, with Bralen Henderson, but also on the outside. Missouri has been looking to add people there as well. I think Missouri is going to be a little bit more of a run-heavy team this year, leaning into that defense and probably running a lot of time off the play clock. Eli Drinkwitz is not exactly Josh Heupel when it comes to hyper-speed offense. I think that's obviously something you're going to see for Missouri once again. And on that offensive line, well, that's a little bit more of a question mark. So adding as many bodies as possible there, especially for potential tackles, I think is very smart business by Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz, to be sure. And I mentioned I expect Mizzou to maybe be a little bit more run-heavy and run-focused offensively this season. I'm pretty sure the Chicago Bears are not going to be entirely run-focused next season in the NFL. And indeed, Luther Burden III goes in the early second round, 39th overall, to the Chicago Bears. So while I was surprised a little bit that Luther fell out of the first round, he didn't fall that far. So this isn't exactly a Shedeur Sanders-like drop, that's for sure. And frankly, I'm glad that I haven't seen Luther Burden really making that big of a deal out of his drop in the draft, acting like, oh, I'll show these teams who passed on me, that sort of deal. I've grown tired of that attitude among a lot of players, and a little gratitude, I think, goes a long way in life. But back to the Bears and Burden's fit there, I think he is a nice fit. And obviously Chicago is doing everything it can to make their second-year quarterback's life, Caleb Williams, a lot easier. They've now got 3 pretty darn good receivers, I would say. They drafted a tight end, and Ben Johnson, their new coach coming in from Detroit, well, he's an offensive-minded kind of guy. He was obviously the OC in Detroit. They were a great offense, a great team the last couple seasons. Chicago's doing what it can to basically take all the excuses away from Caleb Williams. So the offensive line, I'll be honest, I have no idea how good the Bears' offensive line is or the prospects for it next season. I know they haven't been a very good team or line lately, so that would be the obvious sticking point there possibly in Chicago. But this is an interesting fit for Burden. I think he'll play a ton early on this Bears team. Potentially, I mean, most NFL teams these days are running 3 receiver sets the majority of the time. So essentially, I think Burden is going to be more or less a day one starter. He's going to have a really good chance to do it. I think it's a pretty good landing spot. And by the way, Como to Chicago, also known as the John Miller path to greatness, by the way. So hopefully, like myself, we'll see Luther Burden back in Columbia one day as well. And since we're on the topic of run-heavy teams, well, I'd say the New York Jets are going to be looking to run the football next year with Justin Fields as their likely starting quarterback. I'd say Armand Membu, the former Mizzou right tackle who was taken 7th overall in the draft on Thursday, well, he definitely fits that mold. There's no question that Armand Membu can run block. I don't have any at the next level, at any level you want to talk about. We'll see how he does as a pass protector at the next level. I'm not saying I'm being skeptical or anything like that. I'm just simply saying there's no doubt that guy can move some bodies. He's good at that. I promise you he can steamroll people in the run game. So that'll be fun to watch once again, even on the, well, seemingly pretty terrible organization that is the New York Jets. And speaking of the Jets, well, that's where Brady Cook ended up as well, signing as an undrafted free agent with the Jets. And by the way, a decent chance, a decent landing spot for Cook, all things considered, I would say. Along with Justin Fields on their roster, you've got Tyrod Taylor, who I would say is your likely backup. But Jordan Travis, the former Florida State Seminole, Adrian Martinez, neither one of those guys have any NFL experience that I'm aware of. You know, 2 young guys that are basically going to be competing to see if they can make the roster, or somebody's roster at the very least. You know, again, it looks like Tyrod Taylor is likely your veteran backup there, but you never know. If Cook likes, if the Jets decide that they see enough in Cook that he can be a developmental type prospect, well, maybe he can make the practice squad, be on it for the year, and take the sort of Chase Daniel route, which is what Chase did. He was basically on the practice squad from my memory, basically his entire rookie season, save for maybe a game or two. He was active, but guess what happened? Chase Daniel parlayed that season basically not even sitting on the bench, sitting in a pair of shorts on the sidelines most weeks. Well, he still was patient enough to make that into one heck of a career. And really, if anything, Cook has, I would say, a lot of Chase Daniel's good qualities in terms of teams that NFL backups are going to like, that NFL teams will like in their backups. I would say a good guy who's not going to rock the boat or anything like that, a guy who can, you know, get into the playbook and study and all that good stuff. I think Brady Cook is definitely that guy. And if anything, I think Brady Cook has more physical traits than Chase Daniel did that you can sort of talk yourself into, like, oh, well, he can run a little bit. He is, you know, he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but frankly, I think he's got a stronger arm than Daniel, that type of deal. So again, he ran a pretty impressive 40 time at the combine. There's potential. You can talk yourself into some real upside there with Brady Cook if you're an NFL team. So I thought a good landing spot for Brady, just in terms of, obviously they don't have a clear quarterback of the future here, but also not a great spot too, because this is not what I would call a great organization, in my humble opinion. I don't think you're going to see a lot of national NFL people really argue with that at this point. So I'm wishing Brady Cook all the luck in the world, that's for sure. One of my favorite Tigers in recent years. Obviously wishing Membu and Luther Burden all the luck in the world as well, especially when, you know what, I think Luther Burden's going to be a really, really good player in the NFL, and I can't wait to see it. I really can't. Now, I do have to say the veteran backup quarterback in the NFL is somewhat of a dying breed. They do still exist, but maybe not to the extent that they used to. There's a pretty good reason for that, a few of them actually, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. And also, the guy on the Missouri basketball roster that I think is absolutely the most pivotal player on the team heading into 25-26. Again, that in just a little bit here, but first, I want to tell you that obviously the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. And man, if you had the Clippers on the money line the other night, boy, that was a heartbreaker, wasn't it? What a bizarre finish. I don't think I've ever seen a buzzer-beating dunk like that in my entire life at any level of basketball. But regardless, you can't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. At the moment, I'm not totally sure what to expect from Missouri basketball next season. And if I'm being honest with myself and all of you, well, I don't like the team on paper right now as much as I liked last year's Missouri squad. But I do think there's one guy on the team that could change my perception, and that's Annor Boateng. I think if he can live up somewhat to his hype, let's say, I don't know what his hype means exactly. He's a top 30 high school consensus player, I believe, coming out of the state of Arkansas. It was the state player of the year in Arkansas. But so what does that mean? I guess is what I'm saying. Is how much should that mean he immediately comes in as the best player on the team? Well, obviously that didn't happen. So what are you really expecting? Are you expecting him to be an NBA guy, or you just expect him to be a good piece in the SEC? Because if he's just a good quality SEC guard next season, well, that's going to make Missouri a heck of a lot better, because with his natural size and athleticism, if he can be a 37% three-point shooter, let's say, which is, above average, not elite, but pretty darn good, suddenly Missouri just got a lot better. And if he can be a two-way player, if he can play defense too, and I think at times I thought his on-ball defense was pretty good from my eyes in limited action, I'm telling you, Boateng can really make this team, can really make it hum, because I think right now, if Anthony Robinson, we all think he's a good player, he's just got to learn to be a little bit less aggressive with the fouling. I think that's his biggest issue. It really is. And I've always said, hey, give me a guy who's a little bit too aggressive over too passive. I think I can work much more with the aggressive guy than the passive guy. So I think Anthony Robinson is sitting on the cusp of a real big-time breakout season next year. Obviously, Mark Mitchell's a really good SEC caliber kind of player. I think Missouri right now is at least a guard or two short, though. And by guard, I really mean wing. Because I think not only do I like Anthony Robinson, hey, T.O. Barrett, I think, showed a lot of promise last season as well. He's, again, much more of a point guard, lead guard type of player than he is a wing. So Missouri, especially losing Caleb Grill, losing Tamar Bates, those are two really, really good shooters, two really good wings. I think those guys are tough to replace. So Annor Boateng, he's kind of got to be good next year if Missouri is going to be a tournament team, in my humble opinion. And by the way, with a couple spots here, exactly 2 spots potentially for Missouri to use here with the transfer portal window, well, the entry part of it is closed. You can still sign players who have entered. 2 spots left for the Tigers. I think at least one of them, if not both, need to be a guy who can shoot the basketball on the wing. Obviously, two-way players would be ideal. At this point in the process, probably not a whole lot of them out there. So if I know Dennis Gates like I think I do, I'd say he'll probably lean toward offense for these last couple spots here. I think that's probably the right move in this case because, again, I think the Tigers, at least on paper right now, are at least a shooter or two short on the wing. And as Missouri fans, when anybody's talking about, well, Brady Cook, for example, and his ability to, hey, maybe he could be, not only, we'd love to see Brady be a starter at the NFL level, of course, and he's going to get his chance. But hey, being a backup quarterback is not exactly the worst job in the world, as Chase Daniel will tell you, making multi-millions of dollars, essentially holding a clipboard on Sunday afternoons. And I'm not saying that jokingly whatsoever. It's a great job. He does some self-deprecating humor with it occasionally, but Chase Daniel, believe me, he won at life. So Brady Cook is winning at life currently as well, by the way. But the real point here that I'm trying to make is that, well, there's just not a ton of backup NFL career backup quarterbacks anymore. There's a few of them. Don't get me wrong. Heck, Blaine Gabbert was essentially one for the last few years of his career as well. A guy who backed up Patrick Mahomes a couple years ago. Well, and here's the deal. When you are the Kansas City Chiefs or the Cincinnati Bengals, for example, a team that already has an obvious quarterback, Lamar Jackson, whoever it might be, well, there's maybe only 10 or 12 of those guys who are obvious, no doubt starters, maybe half the league if you're feeling generous. The other half of the league, well, is a lot more like the New York Jets. They don't know what the heck they're doing at quarterback. They're just trying to find somebody, and they're going to draft guys, every single year essentially until they find the right guy. So there's going to be a lot of roster churn there between, hey, who's the next young shiny object who hasn't failed in this league yet? Because a lot of times, well, we're going to go for the shiny object over the thing that has already failed me a couple of times. I was like, we've already kind of seen this guy's upside. He's a third, fourth year guy. If you're not a starter by the time you're in your third or fourth year in the league, when's it going to happen? Because, well, now your rookie contract is up, and guess what? Again, there's a new crop of guys every single year getting drafted into the NFL. So for the fact that there are so many teams in the NFL still trying to chase their starter, really, I'm surprised that a team like the Jets would use a roster spot on Tyrod Taylor, because who cares if Justin Fields gets hurt? Okay, so then what? You guys were going to compete for the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback? I'm just not totally seeing the point for the Jets, who obviously do not have their quarterback of the future right now. I'm sorry, Justin Fields. I think we've kind of seen his upside at this point, but again, Brady Cook, he's definitely going to have a shot to compete with those other guys for a roster spot. You just wonder how long he's able to hang around in this league. The fact that, well, Tyrod Taylor, I guess the Jets obviously value his veteran presence and leadership and all that stuff. I think that's something that Brady Cook can have, obviously, in his traits as well. But it's hard. It's really hard to hang around in the NFL when you're not potentially a starter. It just is. It's surprising, frankly, that Missouri has had a couple guys that were able to do it in Chase Daniel and Blaine Gabbert. Very different circumstances for the two of those guys. But really, it's impressive that Gabbert was able to hang around as long as he did, considering, well, what he went through as a starter. So you never know. I'm rooting for Brady Cook, but I just think this idea that, well, maybe he can be a backup, I think that's a tougher putt than a lot of people are admitting. And I'll tell you this, the transfer portal is definitely good for my numbers. I'll tell you that. The viewers eat up the transfer portal, but is the transfer portal good for the actual sport? Specifically, is it good for developing players? Let's talk about that here in just a minute. But first, there is nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every stop, every moment feels huge. Electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it so easy to get playoff tickets, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Last-minute deals, again, can save you up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, the whole deal, all-in pricing. Means no surprise fees at checkout, so take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED ONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So if you follow the NBA closely, you'll know it's no secret that many of the best players in the world right now are non-American players. In fact, I'd say right now, probably the top 4 or 5 players in the league are all foreign-born players. For instance, Nikola Jokic and Luka and SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's Canadian, by the way. And a lot of the best American players in the world are aging, quite honestly. Guys like LeBron James and Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. Of course, there's exceptions to that. Anthony Edwards is a big one, and certainly Boston's Jason Tatum is as well. But this increased international flavor in basketball, on one hand, is great. But on the other hand, it's sort of a sign to me that American basketball is falling a little bit farther behind than it should be, especially when you look at the big men, in my opinion, for whatever reason. There's a million different reasons for this, I would say. But I think American big guys are falling way behind their international counterparts. Listen, I don't want to go too far here. Obviously, America still is home to the best basketball players in the world. There's a reason, again, the United States won the Olympic Games this past year once again, but at the same time, again, an aging team with Stephen Curry that needed LeBron James. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, what that team looks like in a few years. But the main point here that I'm getting to is that I just think that the transfer portal is bad for development of big guys. It should be good, really. You'd think a guy like Peyton Marshall, if he's just going to bounce around to program, seeking whatever he's looking for, maybe it's just money, satisfaction, I don't know. I don't think that's how he's going to best develop as a basketball player. Is that how they do it internationally? These guys just constantly change teams? No, in fact, there's a lot more continuity in international basketball. There may be something to that. Skill development. Again, there's a million potential reasons here. I just don't think that the transfer portal is helping basketball in America right now. It may be helping content, but to me, even if you don't care about the NBA, well, great. I don't think it's great necessarily in a way for college basketball either. Sure, some of these mid-major guys get to bubble up and be part of major conference basketball. Nothing wrong with that necessarily. I just think that in order to get to the very highest level of basketball, you do need continuity at a certain point. You do need to sort of have almost a mind meld between you and some of your teammates, so you know where he's going to go before he even does it, that type of deal. So again, I don't want to overreact to this because, again, America still has the best basketball players in the world for now, but is that going to be the case in 20 years? I think that's an open question. I really do. So going to be interesting to follow. All I know is, in my opinion, the portal isn't really helping this dynamic out from an American basketball fan's perspective. But hey, thanks as always for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen today. Thanks for being patient with me as I got this one out a little bit late today. Was coming back from Branson. Yes, bucolic Branson. Ned Flanders. If Ned Flanders created Las Vegas, it would be Branson indeed. But had a good time down at my daughter's dance competition. Appreciate y'all being patient with me, and definitely check out the portal, by the way, with my colleague Brian Smith. Going to be talking to him tomorrow on that program, by the way. So definitely check out the portal with Brian. It's a great program. Speaking of the transfer portal, could you find a better name than the portal? I don't think so. So check it out on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. So until then, I'm John Miller. This has been Locked On Mizzou.